Hey guys, it's Krusty Old Crow back again. This time, just as Krusty Old Crow, I'm not doing a tactical toy review per se, but I am talking about the G.I. Joe classified line in a different forum this time. So those of you who are only wanting to watch this just to get some information on some upcoming characters that you might be able to buy, I apologize, that's not what this video is about. So feel free to just skip this one by. This one's just a little bit of an update on some conversion work I did with the Falcone figure. For those of you who are thinking of doing some conversions yourself, I'm going to show you a couple options I came up with Falcone. One of them I covered in one video, but the other I haven't yet touched base on. And I'm going to follow up on a subject that is just really a discussion piece and just a bit of fun I wanted to have. And have a back and forth with anyone that's like-minded out there and thinks in the same terms I do. And that's just talking about how to modernize the Joes and still pay tribute to the old characters. And I thought it'd be fun to maybe attempt to design my own Joe for the classified series based on one I haven't seen them come up with yet. And of course, I'm sure it's on their drawing board, but you know me, I'm I'm just a guy who draws for fun and have my whole life. I did the army thing for 25 years, but originally I think I wanted to do the comic thing. And I would love to do the toy design thing. And so much so that, like I said today, I gave Hasbro a copy of my resume online. Didn't tell them why. They might think I want to be a janitor, but hopefully one day, who knows, they'll see a video like this and it'll be a crazy day. But with only 30 subscribers, I doubt it's ever going to happen. But first off, so not going to do head to toes. I'm just going to go right into some things I did. So we talked a while ago about Falcone. Vincent Falcone, the one that comes in this box right here. 1 second. This happy fella. And we talked about the face issue that other critics and I'm liking to agree. We call it the Defoe snapshot look. It's not a face that worked with the design of this character, and it's nothing against the designers at all. It's just some things just don't work out, like they themselves have said about it. So I agree with a certain personality here on YouTube who goes by the name of Analog Ninja, where it's one thing to just complain about things, it's another thing entirely to be the type of person to do things about it. And I'd rather be the person that does stuff about it. It occurs to me I'm still playing music in the background, but this time, because it's not one of my tactical perspective toy reviews, it's not a Canadian musician, and I'm going to turn it off in a second. It's Green Sky Bluegrass doing Time and Breathe, reprised by Pink Floyd. I just really like that song. It gets me in a good mood. So Falcone, I showed you guys originally with his original head. I'm going to pop off with the one I had on there. The big thing was I said we had to cover the Defoe cheeks and make it work a little bit. So I theorized that I could conceivably make a Scottish beard on an Italian figure work. It didn't really work the way I wanted it to, but I'm just showing it to you guys. I'm hoping that's in focus right now. I am still doing one takes. But I did do some painting and highlighting with it, and it was passable enough for me that I thought, yeah, I like that look better on my shelf. I thought he did look very much not like the traditional Falcone, and I had a hard time addressing it as such when I thought of him. But I did like the feel of the character. I thought it changed the dynamic a little bit. But it did loosen up the head when I did that a little bit. Or no, sorry, it didn't. I popped it. I didn't have it popped on correctly. So that's actually how it's supposed to sit. And there you go. And so guys, that's just green stuff putty with a bit of working it with the knife and a little bit of glue on the bottom to keep it up there and keep it from ever popping off when you remove the heads. So I'm going to delicately, as I say, be careful removing the head. I'm going to delicately remove that head. And I'm going to show you the other head that I came up with. Now, some of you have seen I have been using some spare pieces on my breaker figurine. If I'll just pull him quickly down and refresh. The spare pieces came off of a McFarlane military figure. And it's the rifle was one of the spare pieces I got with that, with the strap. And I also managed to, I'll give Falcone back his backpack for a minute, salvage that nice little holster and make that a part of Breaker. But I'm not here to talk really about Breaker so much. It's the same figure I got this piece from, and a camelback from, and a few other things from. And wasn't this down here the other day? Oh dear. Nonetheless, anyways, so for the Falcone, I finally decided to try and work the head off that figure and do a couple things with it. Now, because it was a McFarlane one-piece figure, like more or less, they're more of a statue than an action figure. They're not meant for posability, but there is some joints that can be tweaked and moved. I had to take a Dremel tool and I had to gore out the plastic from under the neck. The head actually, and there you can see, that's the face I went with from that figure. It's not perfect. I don't know if it's an upgrade or a downgrade, but it's a different kind of guy. It's definitely a bit more Italian looking than a Scottish mutton chop beard. But that was the head from the McFarlane toy. This head actually had this helmet with it originally, and that I was able to work off. It pops off, and it was a separate piece entirely. And so I'm going to pop this head off and show you what I did to get it to work. So there you go. That we'll get rid of Falcone. He's fine. Guys bounce back from that stuff all the time. And then I'll just get my pencil here to point it out. So there's the boring I had to do. And I think I have to take it a little bit deeper. He still sits a little bit daddy long neck on there. The neck's a bit wide for this point where it is, and I don't want to bring down the neck, so I got to bring out the hole. So I'm going to bring out the hole just a touch. He didn't have any facial hair or hair painted on, so that is a smoke colored pencil that I just did the 5 o'clock shadowing with, and then I painted on just a light layer of hair just because I knew the beret would cover it. The beret was a perfect coincidence size for the helmeted version. So there you go, you've got the beret on there. And then with the beret off, you can see where the helmet once mounted, and then I could put, if I wanted to, the helmet back on him. I had to sand down the chin that he had. He had part of his chin strap actually attached to the face, but I've got a salvageable head. If I ever get if I wanted to pop this on Dusty, I think it would also work with his uniform. There's some versatility there, so I could keep reusing that head if I wanted to. So this is what happens when you have a life of pack ratting model bits and figure bits and things breaking after moves, and after you're done being disappointed, you still can't bring yourself to throw them out. That's how I came across this, and I'm kind of glad it worked out the way it did with them. It's almost like a John McClane kind of feel to the Falcone figure. So there you go, guys. That's where I left it with Falcone. One last look in case. And yeah, that's not a very aggressive stance, but I do have his articulation all kind of messed up right now. But there was that. And then that was Vice, a Call of Duty shout out. And I don't think this one works. It's something in the eyes, it's something in the hairline, there's something in the upper brow that I'm not touching that doesn't work with those mutton chops, but the face didn't work to begin with. I'm glad I found an alternative. Okay, so that's Falcone's updated thing. So now I'm gonna roll right into what I was talking about, the fun of maybe thinking out a new way to do an old Joe character, right? So I really envy the design team over at Hasbro, that the guy who gets the name slid across his desk and says, "You're doing this guy." All right, and I want you to keep in mind what the original guy was, what he looked like, his personality. I want you to bring some expression to this character for the new age. Bearing in mind we're making a much more detailed character, I want you to throw some good kid on there that makes sense. And I want it to remind me of the original in his uniform and everything. So don't mess with the colors, don't mess with the artistry of this character, tweak it at best. And I think what a fun challenge that would be, especially for guys that are into doing artsy stuff like that, like myself. And I found out one of the guys working at Hasbro in what the guy who's designing all the undead Cobra stuff from the Dark Energon set there, the one that sees the Big Ben release and Shooter released into it. He was a gravedigger. I'm ex-military. This is fun, and I'm having a blast. So, guys, I thought to make a little game of it. So every now and then, I'm gonna pop away from doing the tactical perspective. I'm gonna show you some sketches I've done on a character that I decided to do, and how I've tried to keep it as close to the original as possible, but what tweaks. Now, guys, I'm not going to claim to be a great artist. I didn't succeed as a comic book artist for a reason, because I didn't finish refining those skills at all. But the creative mind never stopped, and adding some tactical knowledge to it all, I would say, benefits what I'm trying to go at. But you know what? Moreover, it's paying attention to what you're being shown with the stuff that they're already doing. So I use an example of rock and roll. Rock and roll is probably the most immediate example I can think of, and I'm just having a look at where I put that book. There it is. Most immediate example I can think of modernizing an old Joe design, and it works. Okay, so if you guys remember the old rock and roll, and I'm gonna call him up on Google and show you what they did, right? So we'll go G.I. Joe rock and roll. So one thing they did for sure is they gave him a modern shirt. And I talked about that in the review, that his two-tone, we'll call it sports shirt, in that it's a fiber that would wick material, everything like that. That's a very modern touch. You can see the tactical pants, the boots, the knee pads, even the new holsters, and the fact that he's coming with a radio, and the tech helmet, tattoos. Every ounce of him is modern, but you still recognize him with the iconic beard, the heavy machine gun, and the M60 as it were in the original, and I guess it's still an updated M60, but there he is beside the original photo of him, right? So this is what I mean by modernizing an old character. You're not changing it enough that it's a new character completely. Not even enough that you have to go, who is that? Let me piece this together in my mind. Your eye is instantly triggered to the memory of this guy. So for example, if you were to make him with a massive backpack and maybe make him way more muscular and decide that he needs black pants, well, then you're not going to necessarily, even though he's got the blonde beard, remember that it's rock and roll, until you read the card and go, oh, it is rock and roll. He's just wearing a lot of different stuff right now, right? Or if you gave him a small gun and no bullet straps, you know, would that still be rock and roll, or would your mind leap elsewhere? So don't, what I'm getting at is the challenge is to not make drastic changes, but to very much modernize these figurines and not have them so lackluster in their detail and form, right? So I thought that was a lot of fun to face that as a personal challenge. And guys, so the one I tackled was one of the earlier ones I remember ever having, and I kind of would like, I haven't seen anything as far as HasLab developing them yet, and I don't know where he would rate on A, fan demand, and B, their priority to make it. But he was never one of my favorites. He kind of stood out a little bit, kind of out of place. I'm talking about Flash. Flash was the science fiction-y laser trooper of the original line of Joe's, either first wave or second, and I think it was probably second, but maybe first. Either way, it was this young fella here, guys. This was Flash. For those of you who might not remember him, he had the very memorable red padding, and he was good on weapon systems. Like you could put him, I think, on the Grand Slam or the Whirlwind, whatever the first few weapon systems that could be towed by the Vamp in the toy sets were. You usually got pictures of Flash sitting on top of them, right? So Flash featured a backpack, a laser gun with the straw wire that could connect to the backpack, And then he had a visor on his helmet that could flip up and down, right? And that was essentially it. There wasn't a whole lot to the Joe packaging and the Joe characters back then. And the designs had to be simple because they were molds, and and talking about simple designs, that when they got so simple, that's how they came up with a certain favorite character, right? And again, I harken back to watch that Netflix special on G.I. Joe for the toys that made us, that series there. So guys, I looked at Flash and I was like, okay, so what are some things you need to keep about the original Flash when you do it? And so I did a quick, like 5-second, 3-minute sketch, right? And just did it from memory without looking at a picture. And essentially I remember that he had to have let me get some sort of a pointer here. He had to have his padding. That was a must-have. He had to keep that padding on there. And I remembered his main colors were olive drab and red. And there was some silver and black mixed in there, but that was it. He was a Christmas tree kind of guy. Red on green, when everybody else was more green or black, and then Cobra was blue, right? So, and then he had those big brown gloves and brown boots. Which I didn't remember right away, but I remembered as I got going, because I always felt like those were a good match, but I didn't understand why they didn't do some of the pads in brown if they were doing the gloves and boot, right? Kill one cow, use all of that leather. Anyways, I did that quick sketch, and then I remembered he had the laser gun, but by this point I did decide I wanted to see, because the thing is, if I'm going to design something in my mind that's supposed to tribute the other thing, that weapon and that backpack are just as much of that character as what the character's wearing when it comes to the 80s Joe line. What would it be if Dusty didn't have that cloth helmet? What would it be if Gung Ho didn't have the grenade launcher? You know what I mean? Or, every Joe had their specific weapon and their specific kit, and I wanted to not stray too far from that. So I went and looked up the gun again, and I was like, yeah, well, you want to retain the gun. Looking at the helmet, he had a very simple helmet design. There was nothing fancy. All it really was the same helmet they were using on the other guys like Breaker and Grunt back in the 80s. But this one had a visor that you could attach to it. Just a clear little U-shaped piece of plastic with 2 nubs that fit into the whole receivers on the side of the helmet. And that changed the dynamic of the character. Now he had a visor piece. Well, that's eye protection. The other guys don't have this. He's clearly a laser trooper with this. And I was like, you got to keep that. He also had a very humble and small battery-looking backpack that wasn't a whole lot of fabric to it, and it was basically like his battery source for his weapon that his weapon would connect to on his back on that little post. It was a small backpack, and I thought, okay, if you're going to redesign him for the modern world, or the modern Joe classified line, I think you would want to keep that battery feel, keep that smaller, maybe medium feel, but maybe update the materials a little bit, and just make it more tactically sound for the character. So I reminded myself I had to do that with the backpack. So then I sit down, guys, and I do like about another maybe half hour to an hour of just sketching and banging out some quick ideas, because already I knew some things I wanted to see on a Flash version of G.I. Joe, and I call them features. All right, so every Joe figure you buy is at a price point, and a lot of that has to do with the amount of plastics, paint, sculpt involved, whether it's new sculpt, reused materials, things like that, and how much extra stuff they're coming. So like these features of the figure, right? I'll go back to rock and roll, or no, actually we'll go over to the guy I reviewed earlier today, old Spirit Iron Knife, all right? And I don't even have half the features on there. He's got his backpack, but he features an eagle, which features 2 pairs of wings, and he features a pair of nice knives, right? That can move on these separate piece holsters. He has separate webbing, and things like that, right? Little not gimmicks, but accessories and separate works that are added onto the figure I call a feature. That's how I would describe it anyways. So I thought about what kind of features I wanted to see on Flash that were true to his character. So then I start banging out this stuff a little bit more dialed in, I guess you would say, guys. So for this part, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to point at something and describe where the thinking is, and hopefully it shows up on camera right now the way I want it to. So the overall body design doesn't change. It's still olive drab with the red padding, and the helmet with the visor, the small to medium backpack, and the las weapon. What's really changed here is how the backpack is, how the padding is laid out in a modern military way, I think. And then what I've done with the weapon. And then I've given them a couple of features that just kind of make sense, guys, all right, in my mind. So I'm just going to go from the top points here. From the helmet, what I did is I looked at the helmet that came with the original Joe, and I decided, you know what, that's no different than what they had for the original line. All the other guys had this kind of helmet, so why don't we do the same? Why don't we take Bazooka's helmet and we just add a little bit to it? Maybe we add a mounting system of some sorts, circa our tunnel rat designs for his night vision goggles. And what we add is just a little flipping mount right here, something that flips up and down, but can receive one of 5 different lenses. Just these small lenses that are clear, yellow, red, black, and polarized. And that allows you to kind of customize just what kind of facial feature and, you know, uniqueness your Flash would have. Okay, so simple little thing, but already 5 visors is premium. But what if you just kept it easy? What if we just had a standard attachable visor, detach or flip up visor? Maybe it's just polarized, or maybe it's black, like pick one. But if you did it as a premium, you could have multiple options as the visor. Over again, moving it back, guys. I'm just gonna sit down again. I'm getting old, boys. So going down the helmet again, you would have that chin strap undone feel to it. Just that helps get that helmet on and off. Although with a sci-fi character like Flash, you could justify having a closed off chin strap, so you can almost make a more technical version of a chin strap. I just avoided doing that. I like the idea of keeping him simple and light, because that's what stood out to me about this laser trooper, this guy that's carrying all this power on his back with this undefined weapon of destruction on him. There's the temptation to make him bulkier and make everything heavier, but they kept him light, sleek, fast, right? You could throw a jetpack on him. You could do all that stuff. Like the character worked for something quick. He looked good on the Ram. I remember that. Anyways, so I didn't want to bulk him up or bulk him down with any more tech than what was required. So if I go over, I've talked about the visor, I've talked about the helmet. I'm going to go down and I'm going to talk about the shoulders for a second. So again, the neck first. The neck, if you look at the original Flash on the design here, he's got the olive drab, but he's got almost like a crew neck, or almost a small light turtleneck effect there. And it's very much a sweater that he's wearing, but it's for the collar part, but the rest of it appears to be a jumpsuit. So I went with that. It's an olive drab jumpsuit with like a wool type top piece, because they really do like incorporating stitch designs in their characters. So you can play with the stitch design. You don't have to stick with what the original is. And I thought, what if he had a jumpsuit that had maybe like a more textured, darker olive drab for the upper part right around here, and then the lower is a more canvasy olive drab jumpsuit to protect them from the heat. You know, it's just a slight offset, but you could see it in the detail of the character and how it's sculpted. I thought about that. So as we go down, I thought, you know, on the sides, you could think he could be the new Joe representation for Trump's Space Force. If you wanted to throw some of those patches on there, that could make sense. That could modernize it. Sure, I say it jokingly, but why not? I just thought maybe just some sci-fi representation with a new color just kind of thrown in there. So for example, everything on sci-fi in the original and how I would have reworked it has remained the olive drab red, some brown glove boot, and then silver trim with black. But if you threw an icon that's yellow over flat black on there, it would really pop and catch. And if it was the right kind of icon, it might fit. I thought about that. I did shrink down a little bit of the bicep padding that they had on him. On theirs, it was a little bit longer and whatnot. I moved it more to the outside of the bicep a little bit, and for that outward protection, and I just shrank it down a bit. When it came to the chest padding, I'm not a big fan of the quilt pattern. If you look on the original, the quilt pattern is how everything is on the original. It's like how grandma would patch together an old quilt, right? In those little square pads or diamond forms. So I went with the modern way plating and padding goes, where it's like inserts, and I decided to do more of a light insert style chest padding, and just the chest, guys. I didn't want to move it to the back because of that articulation issue that we find when we have backpacks on these classified figures, and they do have a second torso layer over the prime one, covering the bend joint in the torso. It does make the holes stop lining up on the figure when you bend it over or tilt it backwards, and then you have a backpack fitting issue that you can get around. Just you have to work that post. It's not good for the post. So I thought, does he really need to have that back padding? He really doesn't. At best, you could get away, if you look right here, you could get away with maybe putting some lower lumbar support, like a small lower padding that doesn't obstruct with the motion. But there's no reason to cover that hole with a guy like Flash. And that would leave the backpack free to mount well. So getting to the backpack a little bit, actually I'll get to the backpack later, guys. The belt, on the original Flash, he just had a same color belt. There was no detail to it. I made mine more of a webbing style belt with the ringlets, and I added a couple of patches. One of the pouches I think would be necessary would be a certain type of toolkit. This is a weapon that probably isn't going back to a standard weapons tech in a rear line situation. This looks pretty prototypical, and odds are the guy firing it's also the guy that has to fix it down the line. So he would probably have some sort of maintenance and cleaning kit on him that would be unique to that weapon. And then first aid kits, you know me, guys. I want you to have your tourniquets. I want you to have all your life-saving stuff. Being G.I. Joe does not make you immortal, it just makes you a favorite. So have your life-saving gear. All right, moving on down. I gave him a cod piece, all right? Because when you're using lasers, there's probably nuclear energies and atoms and radiations and whatnot. And I don't know if Flash has kids yet or wants kids, but I'd be more comfortable if he covered his crotch. I don't know about Hasbro. Maybe they'll leave it alone, but I think it's a good ad. All right, the quadricep padding, I left it virtually the same as what they've done, except I used my insert padding drawing. It's gotten a little sloppy with the drawing. Sorry, guys, but it is what it is. They didn't put knee pads on theirs. I didn't put knee pads on him. We're going to see olive drab right down to the boots, which turned brown. Now, with them, they did have the laces covered up and everything, but you know me, guys. I like my laces, and I like high-speed boots. So I wanted him to have some really good, sturdy boots, but I didn't want him to have too much tech on those boots because I wanted him sleek, I wanted him quick, I wanted him mobile infantry. If you look over in the right hand, this is where I've kind of updated the weapon a little bit. I tried to retain the same look with that cylindrical barrel design, like there's a generator and a gyroscope at play that's helped generating this laser energy, and giving it more of a kind of a shotgun force stock holding part for him to hold on to while he's firing. And I did add a quick release weapon strap so you can keep it slung over one shoulder, but we can address that also with the way that the backpack's designed later. But I'm big on sling weapons, guys, and to me it's a big thing. The heavier the weapon, the more likely you're going to want a sling for it at some point. And I'd like to see Hasbro get some, I guess, new strategies to make some better slings. And then we've got that cable piece. Now, the cable piece, the way they had it in the original Flash was it was connected to the gun and then you would plug it into the backpack. And I thought that's the way to go. You don't want to have a separate individual cable where you got to plug it into 2 ports, right? As you're posing, any one of those ports can pop and you're a sad panda. You're trying to do posing. It's like, don't, right? So nothing wrong with the original design, having one fixed end. What I did though is I said, I wanted to have the gun in 2 pieces so that you could get the handle in the grip, like you could put the pistol grip in the guy's hand and then slide the buttstock assembly, kind of like what I was kind of getting at here, in after with that hose attached, right? And then conversely at the other end of the hose connecting into the backpack, I wanted to have a thicker, almost star-like plug where it's a circle and then the rectangles that fit, because that's what an industrial power plug would look like. It's got locking bolts on it and things like that, and you should have that. It would help the rubber or plastic cable representation sit better in a attachment like a backpack on the figurine. So you would have that. Not much more to say on the rifle. I think the biggest other feature I want to talk about is what's in his left hand. There's 2 features on his left hand that I've added to his character that I think would fit with the sci-fi character. The first one is his wrist. It is a heads-up display flip gauntlet kind of thing. Guys, in the Army, we have wrist GPSs that we wear. They're they're like no bigger than your Timex watch, maybe a bit bigger if they've got a few functions, but a global positioning satellite you can have one on your wrist the same way you have a watch, and I think every soldier needs one. It behooves you to know where you are and know where you're going, and I think it makes sense that all the Joes start showing some GPSs or tech on their wrist or on their belt somewhere that's showing that stuff, and that's what I'd love to bring to Hasbro. But with this one, what I pictured is very similar to what they did with Grunt, where Grunt has a HUD on his chest. This is a smaller one, and where Grunt is more of it's a map overlay, it's a situational awareness heads-up display. This one I pictured be more relevant to his weapon and his backpack power supply and the distribution and radiation levels and all that stuff that goes with wearing a nuclear device, right? So that would be his heads-up, and it would be a flip-up, flip-down kind of thing, simple pin system. And I would like to see if Hasbro were to do that, they use the same kind of laminate decal that they used on the CoverGirl tablet. I think would work well for that kind of functionality and appearance, right? And the fact that you could close it means you don't always have to be looking at this piece of tech on his wrist. It could be flat on it as well. So that brings us over to finally the backpack a little bit. I want to talk about that. So on this backpack diagram, I did change a little bit. I kept the top shape of the original backpack as much as I could, where it's got the offset box design. If you can see on the original guy, I've tried to make the top of it look similar to the top of the backpack as they had it on the original, just the top. And then what I wanted to do is I was going to apply some tactical canvas and pouching to it to secure the tech that's in there, protect it from the elements a little bit, from wetness, moisture, dust, whatnot. And I figured at the core of it, in the center right there, would be the main power supply. So I pictured a large cylindrical battery as we're getting into classifieds, getting more into the crossover with the transformer and the dark energon and all that stuff. I figured these sci-fi batteries or whatever would slide in there, and then this would be a zipper that zipped down. And then you would have this flat bottom piece. And the reason I wanted the flat bottom piece is it represents more of the tech supporting the gun as well. But this deep inset receiver for the hose would be on that bottom piece. And this mounting part here on the bottom, I'll talk to in a second, but you'll see how these curved bars are a part of the backpack. Those would be extra weight support for his shoulders that would clamp on to his existing shoulder supports for his vest. That second chest piece that we've got, they would snap on top of it, and that would look more supported for this massive piece of, well, heavy looking battery and generator on his back. It kind of would look a little cool with some vents and stuff. Doesn't have to be super thick or gaudy, just it slips over this piece here on the shoulder pieces with these brackets. That pin still goes in the back, but that pin would also serve a second function, and that would be for this in his hand. It's a tripod. If we were to put a nice little tripod that did actually fold open and closed, it didn't necessarily have to retract in any way, but fold open and closed, there would be a rod in here that would connect to the midpoint of the rifle at the bottom of the cylinder, which would simulate a sentry gun setup. This post would set up on a separate rectangular piece on the side of the tripod, and therefore you would have your power supply mounted right to the tripod with the hose drooping down under it, right? And then you would attach this small little radar. It's a triangular little radar piece that would come off a clip set right here, and you would mount it up top over here like that, and you would have a sentry gun. And I thought a sentry gun would be a cool thing for Flash to bring to the table in a modern Joe era, because we've seen them in the video games. We've all played Battlefield, Call of Duty, all that. We know people like sentry guns, but we haven't had a scenario where a Joe can bring one to the table yet. And I think Flash would be the guy, right? If anybody's going to bring a techie new sentry gun, I think Flash is the guy. I do know Tripwire's coming out with his EOD drone, RC drone, and I think that's got a machine gun mount arm on it, and I think that's as close as they're going to get to sentry guns, but that's it. The last thing I wanted to talk about, guys, is it wouldn't be a Joe figure if you couldn't take that helmet off. And like I said, guys, I'm more cartoony than comic-y now, and I'm not as refined as I would hope to be at this age. But the one thing I want to talk about is why I chose this kind of a facial expression for our boys. Sorry, let's see. Can I see that on there? Or can you guys see where I'm pointing? There we go. That's in center. Okay. I picture Flash to be a younger than say Spirit for sure. Definitely younger than Bazooka and Gung Ho, but maybe around the Breaker like age representation, or Dusty, in that he's in his mid to late 20s, early 30s at best. But when they describe Flash in the write-up on him, guys, they say that he's very intelligent, which we explain why he's working science fiction stuff, and very intelligent and very logical, and he makes very good deductions. So I thought, most of our Joes are given... They're given serious looks, long, hard stares. They're mean mugging, right? And then, like I said, with the Falcone one, it was nice because it was a different kind of expression for once. And I thought, it's awesome when every now and then you get a quirky expression on the figure that works. What if you did a Joe with a more knowing look in his face, like, I told you so, or, see, it's like a sarcasm, like, what are you talking about, right? And that's what I was trying to do with that, and I thought that might work, because if you don't like the expression on his face, just cover it up with the helmet and the visors. Preferably one of 5 visors, right? So what I've done here is I've basically made Flash. I've explained how I think he could be designed that would work within the what they're already doing with the toy market and things like that. And I had a lot of fun doing it, guys. So if you sat through this whole thing and listened to this ADHD near 50-year-old fool talk and go on about his drawings and his imagination about the characters, and I really appreciate you. But moreover, if you're one of the guys that likes to throw out play the game with me here in the comments, if you liked what I did there, or you want to do this yourself, hey, let's go back and forth. feel free to leave a Joe that maybe they haven't done in classified, maybe they're not going to get around to. I'll look it up if I don't know it or didn't already have it as a kid, and I'll do another one of these. This was a lot of fun. I'm already thinking along the lines of where Lifeline falls in, or Alpine, right? Some of my favorites that I have not seen them do, and I'm thinking maybe I'll whip them off. But hey, and if anybody knows over at the Joe hiring division, tell them there's a Canadian veteran looking for a cushy job online about making G.I. Joes as part of their team. Shouldn't say cushy, looking for the challenge. But yeah, anyways, back to the reality of what I'm doing. Guys, thank you very much for being subscribers. Those of you who watched this and did subscribe. And for those of you who like this, please hit that like and feel free to subscribe as well. I am going to go back to doing more of the toy reviews. I do have quite a few more to get through before I'm all caught up on my collection and just going new purchase by new purchase. And I am coming to some more of these conversion videos as I get to them. So thanks again, guys. Great to see you back, and I hope to see you again real soon. Take care.